Luca Moretti broke down in front of his daughter's grave at exactly 6:17 a.m., when the cemetery was still empty and the city had not fully woken up yet. It was the only hour he allowed himself to come here, the only hour no one could see the most feared man in his world, shaking like a lost father who had arrived too late. The headstone stood simple and unforgiving before him. Sophia Moretti, beloved daughter, age 12, no titles, no last name that carried fear, just a child's name carved into stone, colder than the rain that soaked through Luca's coat. He stared at it as if the letters might suddenly rearrange themselves into a lie he could escape. He had survived wars between families. He had survived betrayals, arrests, blood, and silence. But nothing had prepared him for this quiet. Nothing had taught him how to stand in front of a grave that carried his heart inside it. "I'm sorry," Luca said, his voice barely more than breath. Saying it out loud felt useless, but not saying it felt worse. "I should have been there. I should have seen it coming." His hands trembled as he removed his gloves. The scars on his knuckles looked out of place here, surrounded by flowers and damp grass. Those hands had built an empire. Those same hands had failed to protect a 12-year-old girl who loved to draw, hated broccoli, and believed her father was stronger than the world. Luca lowered himself slowly until one knee touched the wet ground. The motion hurt his pride more than his body, but he didn't care. Pride had no meaning here, only regret did. From inside his coat, he pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft from being opened too many times. A child's drawing, stick figures, a crooked house, a sun with a smile. Sophia had given it to him the night before everything went wrong. "How you said this was us," he whispered, placing the drawing against the stone so the wind wouldn't take it. "You said I was the tall one because I always had to see danger first." His breath caught. He pressed his lips together, trying to regain control. But the tears came anyway, silent at first, then heavier. "But before we continue, I want to make a very special invitation. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps me see that you support me and are enjoying my stories. And comment below which city you're watching us from. Now let's continue." Luca wiped his face with the back of his hand, angry at himself for losing control. He had trained his men never to show weakness, and yet here he was, exposed to stone and sky. "I promised you safety," he said, his voice breaking despite his effort to keep it steady. "I thought money, power, and fear were enough. I was wrong." A few dozen feet away, behind a service vehicle parked near the trees, a girl stood perfectly still. Her hood was pulled low, hiding most of her face, but her eyes were wide and locked on him. She knew the sound of his voice better than anyone. She knew when he was lying. She knew when he was hurting. Sophia Moretti was alive. Her heart pounded as she watched her father crumble in a way she had never seen before. This was not the man who gave orders without raising his voice. Not the man who filled rooms with silence just by entering them. This was a father begging a stone to forgive him. 5 months earlier, Sophia had believed she was going to die. She remembered the sudden brightness of headlights, the violent sound of metal folding in on itself, the pressure against her chest, then hands pulling her free, firm but careful, a woman's voice cutting through the chaos. "Stay with me. Look at my face. You're safe now." When she woke up, the room was small and unfamiliar. No hospital noise, no nurses, just clean walls, a locked door, and a woman sitting nearby with tired eyes and a calm voice. Her name was Maribel Grant. "You're alive," Maribel had told her gently, "but someone wanted you dead, someone close to your father." At 12 years old, Sophia learned that survival sometimes meant disappearing. Now hidden in the cemetery, Sophia felt her throat tighten as Luca pressed his forehead briefly against the headstone. She had never seen him cry like this. Not when he was hurt, not when he lost men, not even when her mother died years earlier. "Dad," she whispered, the word trapped in her chest. Beside her, Maribel watched the surroundings carefully, never letting her guard down. "We can't stay long," she murmured. "If anyone sees you, I just want to watch him," Sophia replied softly. "Just for a minute." Luca stood again, straightening his coat, forcing his body back into its familiar armor. He pulled a small silver bracelet from his pocket, the one Sophia had worn every day. He placed it gently on the grave. "You'd tell me not to blame myself," he said quietly. "You always did that, even when you were scared." Sophia remembered that night. She remembered holding his hand and telling him it wasn't his fault when he left late for a meeting. The memory cut deeper now. Maribel's phone vibrated. She checked it quickly, then tightened her jaw. "Someone is making a move today," she said. "They think Luca is distracted." Sophia's chest tightened. "Because of me?" "Yes," Maribel answered honestly. "Because he loved you more than his rules." Luca stepped back from the grave, taking one last look as if trying to memorize it. Then he turned and walked away, unaware of the eyes following him with a mixture of love, fear, and resolve. Sophia watched him go, something new settling inside her. He thought he had lost everything, but the truth was far more dangerous. Because when a man like Luca Moretti believes he has nothing left to protect, he becomes capable of burning the world down. And soon Sophia would have to decide whether revealing herself would save him or destroy them both. Luca Moretti left the cemetery without looking back, but the weight followed him all the way to the car. The engine purred softly as the driver pulled away, yet inside Luca's chest there was only noise. Memories collided with calculations, grief with instinct. He pressed his forehead briefly against the cold window, allowing himself exactly 3 seconds to feel before the armor returned. By the time the car merged into traffic, Luca Moretti was no longer a mourning father. He was a boss again. "Any movement?" he asked, his voice steady, eyes already scanning reflections in the glass. "Yes," the driver replied. "2 unfamiliar vehicles crossed our route 3 blocks back. They pulled off when they saw the second escort." Luca nodded. "They're testing." The city outside looked ordinary. Coffee shops opening. People rushing to work. No one knew that a war was shifting quietly beneath their feet. That was always how it started. Never with noise. Always with patience. At the Moretti estate, Luca walked straight past greetings and security checks. He entered his office, closed the door, and stood still for a moment, breathing slowly. On the wall hung an old photo of Sophia at age 7, missing a tooth, smiling without fear. He turned it face down. Then he picked up the phone. "Bring me Vincent," he said. "Now." Across the city, Sophia sat in the back seat of Maribel's car, hands clenched in her lap. The cemetery image replayed in her mind again and again. Her father's voice, the way his shoulders sagged, the bracelet left behind. "I shouldn't have gone," Sophia whispered. "You needed to," Maribel replied gently. "But now you need to understand something." She glanced at Sophia through the mirror. "Your father is about to become very dangerous." Sophia swallowed. "Because he thinks I'm dead." "Yes," Maribel said, "and because he thinks someone took you from him." Sophia's chest tightened. "Who did it?" Maribel hesitated. "That's what we're trying to prove." 5 months earlier, Maribel had been hired quietly. No contract. No names. Just one task: extract a child from a crash scene before anyone else arrived. Luca had never known. That secrecy had saved Sophia's life, but it had also planted a ticking clock. Back at the estate, Vincent Russo sat across from Luca, his posture tense. He had been Luca's right hand for years, loyal, efficient, too efficient sometimes. "You wanted to see me?" Vincent asked. Luca studied him in silence. He noticed details he had ignored before, the way Vincent avoided direct eye contact for half a second too long, the faint tension in his jaw. "Tell me about the night of the crash," Luca said calmly. Vincent stiffened. "We've gone over this." "We have," Luca agreed. "Indulge me." Vincent took a breath. The route was cleared. 2 vehicles ahead, 1 behind. No threats detected. Then the impact. It was sudden. Too sudden, Luca said. "You recommended that route." "Yes," Vincent replied quickly. "It was supposed to be safer." "Supposed to be," Luca echoed. Silence stretched. Luca leaned forward slightly. "Someone leaked our location that night," he said. "Someone who knew Sophia would be in the car." Vincent swallowed. "You're not suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting," Luca interrupted softly. "I'm asking." Vincent shook his head. "I would never—" Luca raised a hand. "Enough. Leave." Vincent stood, confused and unsettled. As the door closed behind him, Luca exhaled slowly. Doubt had entered the room, and doubt was deadly. Meanwhile, Sophia sat on the edge of the bed in the safe house, staring at the bracelet Maribel had taken back from the grave. It felt heavier now. "He loves you," Maribel said quietly. "I know," Sophia replied. "That's why I'm scared." "What are you thinking?" Maribel asked. Sophia lifted her gaze. "If I don't tell him I'm alive, he'll destroy himself trying to punish ghosts." "And if you do tell him?" Maribel asked. Sophia's voice trembled. "Then whoever tried to kill me will try again." Maribel nodded slowly. "That's the choice." That night Luca stood alone in his office, staring at a city he had once believed he controlled. He picked up the phone again. "I want every movement traced," he said. "Quietly, no blood, not yet." When he hung up, he spoke to the empty room. "You took my daughter," he said. "Now you'll make a mistake." Across the city, Sophia lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had seen her father cry. Now she would see how far he was willing to go, and soon the truth would demand a price from all of them. The certainty did not come all at once. It came like a slow tightening around Luca Moretti's chest, the kind that didn't hurt immediately, but made breathing harder with every hour that passed. He was standing in his office when it finally settled into something undeniable. Nothing had exploded. No threats had been made. No warnings delivered. And that was exactly what bothered him. For 5 months, the world had treated Sophia's death as settled, clean, final. Enemies had gone quiet. Rivals had stepped carefully. No one had tried to provoke him. No one had tested his edges. That wasn't respect. That was waiting. Luca walked to the window and looked down at the city he ruled through whispers and fear. New York never slept, but it always watched. And now it was watching him. "She's not gone," he said aloud. The words felt dangerous. Hope always was. He turned as the phone on his desk vibrated. One of his men. Low-level, nervous voice. "We picked up something strange," the man said. "A burner phone activated near the crash site, just for seconds. Then nothing." Luca closed his eyes. Burners didn't wake up randomly. They woke up when someone needed to know something, or when someone needed to confirm something. "Who else knows?" Luca asked. "No one," the man replied quickly. "You said keep it quiet." "Good," Luca said. "Keep it buried." He hung up and sat slowly in his chair, fingers steepled. The crash had been too perfect, the investigation too smooth, the casket too heavy for a body no one was allowed to see. He had accepted it because grief demanded something to hold on to. But now, grief was loosening its grip, and instinct was stepping back in, and instinct was screaming. Across the city, Sophia felt the same tightening, though she didn't know why. She sat at the small kitchen table of the safe house, staring at a math problem she had already solved twice. Maribel noticed immediately. "You're drifting," she said gently. "I feel like something is coming," Sophia replied. Maribel didn't dismiss it. Children who survived trauma often sensed danger before adults did. Survival sharpened instincts. "You're not wrong," Maribel admitted. "Someone is getting closer." Sophia's fingers curled around her pencil. "My father." "Yes," Maribel said. "And someone else." That night, Luca made a decision he had avoided since the funeral. He reviewed the inner circle. Only 6 people had known Sophia's exact route the night of the crash. Fewer had the authority to change it. Fewer still could move without being questioned. One name sat heavier than the rest. Vincent Russo. Luca didn't want it to be true. Vincent had been with him since the early days, had eaten at his table, had laughed with Sophia when she was small. Betrayal from an enemy was expected. Betrayal from family broke foundations, but patterns didn't lie. Vincent had grown cautious since the crash, less visible, more distant, always just one step removed. Luca didn't summon him this time. He followed him. From a distance, from shadows, Luca watched Vincent enter a modest office building in Brooklyn that had no business ties to the family. No cameras outside, no signs, a place designed to be ignored. Vincent stayed inside for 27 minutes. Luca memorized every second. Back at the safe house, Maribel packed a second emergency bag. "Just in case," she said. Sophia watched quietly. "You think they'll find us?" "I think they already have," Maribel replied. "They're just confirming." Sophia nodded slowly. "If they confirm, they'll tell my father." "Yes," Maribel said. Sophia swallowed. "And then?" Maribel didn't answer right away. Then things moved fast. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She replayed the image of her father at the grave again and again, the way his voice cracked, the way he apologized to stone. She had always believed her father was unbreakable. Now she knew he was just a man who loved too much, and that scared her more than his enemies. Luca returned home long after midnight. He poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. His thoughts were too loud. If Sophia was alive, someone had lied to him. If someone had lied to him, they were still close. And if they were still close, they were still dangerous. He picked up his phone and typed a message he deleted twice before sending. Watch Vincent. Don't let him know. He set the phone down and finally allowed himself to say the words again, this time with conviction. My daughter is alive. Across the city, Sophia stood at the window as a familiar black sedan slowed at the corner. It didn't stop. It didn't need to. They're watching, she said calmly. Maribel joined her. Yes. Sophia took a breath. Then I want to stop hiding. Maribel turned sharply. That's not your decision alone. Sophia met her gaze. 12 years old, and already older than she should have been. It's my life. Maribel studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Then we do this carefully, she said, because once your father knows. Sophia finished the sentence softly. Nothing will be the same. That same night, Luca stood on his balcony again, city lights reflecting in his eyes. The game had changed, and for the first time since the crash he wasn't reacting, he was hunting. Luca Moretti had learned long ago that speed was a weapon, but patience was a sentence. And now, patience was what he chose. From the outside, nothing about his life appeared to change. He still attended meetings, still approved shipments, still spoke calmly to men who feared him. But inside, every thought pointed in one direction, tightening like a rope drawn slowly, but without mercy. Sophia was alive. The certainty had moved beyond instinct. It had settled into fact. Luca replayed every detail of the past 5 months. The controlled funeral, the sealed casket, the way officials had rushed him through paperwork as if afraid he might ask the wrong questions. He had been numb then. Grief had wrapped around his mind like fog. Now the fog was gone, and the shape beneath it was unmistakable. Someone had staged his daughter's death, and someone had benefited from him believing it. Luca sat alone in the upper room of one of his oldest properties, a place he rarely used anymore. The room smelled of dust and old wood, reminders of a time before power had replaced trust. He spread photos and notes across the table, not because he needed them, but because the ritual helped him think. 6 names, 6 people who knew Sophia's exact movements that night. One of them stood out like a stain that refused to fade. Vincent Russo. Luca didn't hate him yet. Hate required certainty. What he felt now was something colder, something that left room for disappointment. He picked up his phone and made a single call. Tell Vincent I want coffee, he said. No guards, no pressure. Vincent arrived an hour later, wearing the same careful expression he had perfected over the years. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You look tired, Vincent said as he sat. So do you, Luca replied evenly. They drank coffee in silence for a few moments. Luca let it stretch. Silence always made people reveal themselves. I visited Sophia today, Luca said casually. Vincent's cup paused halfway to his mouth, just for a second. The cemetery? Vincent asked. Yes. I'm glad, Vincent said. You shouldn't carry that alone. Luca nodded. I told her I failed her. Vincent swallowed. You didn't. Luca leaned forward slightly. If I told you she wasn't dead, what would you say? The question landed like a blade laid gently on skin. Vincent laughed once, too fast. I'd say grief is doing what grief does. Would you? Luca asked. Vincent met his gaze. Yes. Luca smiled faintly. Then let's hope that's all it is. The meeting ended politely, but when Vincent left, Luca did not sit back down. He stood very still, because the lie had been spoken. Across the city, Sophia felt a different kind of stillness settle around her. The safe house no longer felt invisible. Every passing car sounded deliberate. Every shadow felt placed. Maribel noticed it too. They're close, Maribel said quietly as she checked the windows. Too close. Sophia hugged her knees to her chest. He's coming, isn't he? Yes, Maribel replied. Your father doesn't ignore patterns. Sophia's voice shook. I don't want him to see me like this, hiding. Maribel knelt in front of her. He won't see you as weak, he'll see you as alive. That night, Luca gave orders he never thought he'd give. No visible weapons, he told his men. No intimidation, no sudden movements. They hesitated. This isn't a negotiation, Luca said quietly. This is my daughter. The message traveled fast. When Luca approached the safe house, he did so alone. no convoy, no guards at his side, just a man walking toward a truth he had buried alive. Inside, Sophia stood frozen when she heard the knock. 3 soft taps, a pause, 2 more, the code Maribel had told her about. Maribel opened the door slowly. Luca stood there, unarmed, his face pale, eyes searching like a man afraid to blink. For several seconds, no one spoke. Sophia took 1 step forward. "Dad," she said. The sound of her voice broke something inside him that grief had not managed to destroy. Luca's knees buckled. He dropped to the floor without caring how it looked. His breath came out in a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "You're real," he whispered. "Please, tell me you're real." Sophia rushed to him and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I am. I promise." He held her carefully, as if afraid she might disappear again. His hands trembled violently now. He didn't hide it. "I buried you," he said hoarsely. "I talked to stone and begged it to forgive me." Sophia cried quietly. "I saw." Luca froze. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "You were there." She nodded. "I didn't know how to stop you." He closed his eyes, overwhelmed, then pressed his forehead to hers. "You saved yourself," he said. "That's all that matters." Maribel watched silently, knowing this reunion was already creating consequences. When Luca finally stood, his body changed. Not hardened, focused. "Tell me everything," he said gently. Sophia hesitated, then spoke. "I heard a voice the night of the crash. Someone I knew." Luca's jaw tightened. "Do you remember who?" She nodded slowly. "Yes." That was enough. Luca turned to Maribel. "Get ready to leave." Maribel stiffened. "Leave?" "Yes," Luca said. "Because whoever did this will realize now that I know." Sophia grabbed his hand. "Promise me something. Anything." "No lies," she said, "and no killing because of me." Luca knelt so they were eye level. "I won't lie to you," he said, "and I'll end this clean." Outside, a car idled too long at the corner. Inside, a family reunited just in time to face what came next. Because truth, once revealed, does not ask permission. It demands consequences. The moment Luca Moretti left the safe house with Sophia beside him, the world began to rearrange itself around a truth that had been buried too deeply for too long. He did not rush, but every step carried purpose, as if the city itself were bending slightly to let him pass. Sophia walked close, her hand wrapped tightly around his, feeling the tension in his grip, even as he tried to shield her from it. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reckoning. Inside the car, silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the muted sound of traffic outside. Luca kept his eyes forward, jaw set, while his mind worked through layers of betrayal and consequence. He had imagined this reunion 1,000 times in the quiet hours after the funeral, but never like this. Never with danger still circling. Never with the realization that the people he trusted most had nearly destroyed the only thing that mattered to him. Sophia studied his profile carefully, noticing how different he looked now. He was calmer but not softer, focused in a way she had never seen before. This wasn't the man who raised his voice to command rooms. This was a man who had already decided what needed to be done and was simply waiting for the moment to do it. That calm frightened her more than anger ever could. When they arrived at Luca's private residence outside the city, the security team froze for a fraction of a second at the sight of Sophia stepping out of the car. Eyes widened, breath caught, but no one spoke. Luca's authority settled over them immediately, unspoken but absolute. He led Sophia inside, past familiar hallways she hadn't seen in years, the scent of polished wood and old memories filling the air. Once the doors were closed, Luca knelt in front of her again, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. His voice was calm, but there was an urgency beneath it that he could not fully hide. He told her that the next hours would be difficult, that people might say things that didn't make sense, that fear would try to convince her to doubt what she knew. He told her that none of it was her fault, and that no matter what happened next, she was not alone anymore. Sophia listened carefully, nodding, trying to be brave in a way no 12-year-old should ever have to learn. She told him she remembered the voice from the night of the crash more clearly now, that hearing it again would remove any doubt. Luca didn't press her further. He already knew whose voice it was. What he needed now wasn't confirmation, it was control. "Before we continue," Tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in his place. Don't leave the video because what comes next will give you chills. Luca summoned Vincent that evening, choosing a place that carried weight without menace. A quiet private dining room, warm light, no visible guards, the kind of setting that suggested honesty rather than threat. Vincent arrived composed, but there was something fractured beneath the surface now. He sensed the shift. He felt it in the air, in Luca's posture, in the absence of small talk. They sat across from each other, the table between them bare except for 2 glasses of water. Luca spoke first, his tone measured, controlled, almost gentle. He spoke of loyalty, of years shared, of trust, built through silence and sacrifice. Vincent listened carefully, nodding at the right moments, his hands folded tightly together as if holding himself in place. Then Luca said her name, not softly, not angrily, clearly, Sophia. The reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Vincent's breath caught, his eyes flicked toward the door, then back to Luca, calculating, searching for escape that no longer existed. Luca didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply waited, letting the weight of the truth press down until Vincent could no longer carry it. "You should have killed me too," Vincent said finally, his voice low and hollow. "That night." Luca leaned back, studying him with a sadness that cut deeper than rage. He asked why. Why after all the years? Why after being welcomed into his home, into his family? Vincent laughed bitterly and spoke of fear, of ambition, of believing that removing Sophia would make Luca predictable, controllable, weak enough to replace. What Vincent didn't know was that Sophia was already there. She stood just beyond the doorway, hidden from view, her heart pounding as she listened to a man she once trusted confess to destroying her life. When Luca opened the door and invited her inside, the color drained from Vincent's face. The sight of her standing there, alive, watching him, shattered whatever defenses he had left. Sophia didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him and spoke his name, the same way she had when she was younger, when she believed he was safe. That single moment broke him completely. Vincent collapsed into the chair, hands covering his face, his confession spilling out in fragments that sealed his fate. Luca listened to everything. He didn't interrupt. When it was over, he stood and made a single call. Vincent was taken away quietly, not to be executed in anger, but to face consequences that would strip him of everything he thought power had given him. Luca kept his promise. No violence in front of Sophia, no lies. Later that night, Luca sat beside his daughter as she finally allowed herself to cry. He held her without words, understanding now that strength wasn't measured in fear or control, but in how much pain one was willing to carry so another didn't have to. Outside, the city continued unaware, but inside that room something fundamental had shifted forever. The war was ending, and the healing was only just beginning. The night Vincent Russo disappeared from Luca Moretti's world, the city did not notice. There were no sirens, no rumors spreading through bars or back rooms, no sudden shifts in territory that outsiders could track. That was how Luca wanted it. Loud endings were for men who needed to be feared. Luca needed something else now. He needed stability, and more than that, he needed time to think about what kind of man he would become after everything that had been taken from him. Sophia stayed in Luca's residence for the first time since the crash, sleeping in a room that still carried traces of her childhood. The walls were the same soft color. The shelves still held books she had once loved, and the faint smell of lavender lingered in the air. Luca had never allowed anyone to change it. Walking past that door every day had been his punishment, and now, hearing her quiet breathing from inside, felt almost unreal, like a mercy he wasn't sure he deserved. Luca spent most of the night awake, seated in a chair outside her room, listening to the subtle sounds of the house. He realized how little attention he had paid to silence before. Silence used to mean safety. Now, it meant responsibility. Every creak, every distant sound reminded him that danger had not vanished simply because the truth had come out. Vincent had acted alone, but men like him never believed they were alone. Fear had allies, and Luca needed to find them before they found Sophia again. In the early hours of the morning, Luca began dismantling what remained of Vincent's influence. He did it methodically, stripping away connections, freezing accounts, cutting communication lines that had once felt invisible. This wasn't revenge, it was containment. Each decision was weighed against a single question that guided him now. Does this make my daughter safer, or does it make my ego feel better? Anything that failed that test was discarded without hesitation. When Sophia woke, she found Luca in the kitchen, moving carefully, unsure of himself in a space that had never truly been his. He made coffee the wrong way and burned the toast, and when she laughed softly at him, the sound startled him. It had been so long since laughter existed in his life without pain attached to it that he didn't know how to respond at first. Then he smiled, slow and uncertain, and something inside his chest loosened just a little. They ate together quietly, exchanging small, ordinary words that felt strange after months of secrecy and fear. Sophia asked about school. Luca promised she would return soon, safely under a different arrangement. He didn't explain yet. He knew she needed space to simply be a child again, even if that innocence could never fully return. Some scars lived beneath the skin, invisible but permanent. Later that day, Luca met with the few men he still trusted completely. He didn't raise his voice or threaten them. He spoke plainly, telling them the truth about Sophia, about Vincent, about the cost of blind loyalty. He made it clear that the rules had changed. Anyone who put ambition above family would no longer have a place near him. Some of the men looked relieved, others looked afraid. Luca accepted both reactions as necessary. Sophia spent the afternoon with Maribel, who visited quietly, staying just long enough to ensure that the transition was real and stable. The bond between them had been forged in fear, but it was strong nonetheless. Sophia hugged her tightly, thanking her for keeping her alive, even when it meant keeping her hidden. Maribel told her that survival was never something to apologize for, and that bravery sometimes looked like waiting instead of fighting. As the sun set, Luca and Sophia sat together in the living room, the city lights glowing faintly through the windows. Luca spoke carefully, choosing honesty without burdening her with every detail. He explained that the world he lived in was dangerous, and that loving him meant accepting limits that other children didn't have to face. He told her he would never lie to her again, even when the truth was uncomfortable. Sophia listened closely, absorbing the weight of a future that would never be simple. That night, Luca received confirmation that Vincent had begun to talk, not out of remorse, but out of fear. Names surfaced, connections unraveled. The threat wasn't as large as Luca had once imagined, but it was enough to remind him how fragile safety could be. He handled it quietly, efficiently, without spectacle. Each loose end tied was another step toward a life where Sophia could breathe without looking over her shoulder. Before going to bed, Luca stood at Sophia's doorway again, watching her sleep. He thought about the grave he had knelt before, the stone that bore her name, the tears he had shed believing the world had taken her from him forever. That version of himself felt distant now, but not erased. Pain didn't disappear. It transformed, becoming something that could either poison or protect. Luca chose protection. He understood now that power was not proven by how much fear one could create, but by how much harm one could prevent. For years, he had believed control came from dominance. Now he knew it came from restraint. The realization did not make him weaker. It made him dangerous in a different way. As the house grew quiet, Luca allowed himself one final thought before sleep claimed him. Sophia was alive. She was safe, for now. And whatever came next, he would meet it as a father first and everything else second. The war that had nearly destroyed him was over, but the work of rebuilding had only just begun. And for the first time since the night of the crash, Luca closed his eyes without fear of what the morning might bring. The calm that settled over Luca Moretti's house after Vincent's fall was not peace. It was the kind of stillness that followed a storm, when the air felt cleaner but the ground remained unstable beneath your feet. Luca sensed it in the way his men spoke more carefully, in how doors closed more softly, in how Sophia paused before asking even simple questions. Everyone understood that something irreversible had happened, and no one yet knew what shape the future would take. Luca spent the following days restructuring his world with an attention he had never given it before. Meetings were shorter, words chosen with care, decisions filtered through a lens that had not existed in his life until now. He no longer asked what would expand his reach or strengthen his name. He asked what would reduce risk, limit exposure, and remove unnecessary danger from Sophia's life. Some opportunities were abandoned entirely, not because they were unprofitable, but because they were loud. Loud things attracted eyes, and eyes attracted consequences. Sophia noticed the changes even if she did not fully understand them. She watched how Luca returned home earlier, how his phone rang less at night, how his face softened when he saw her sitting in the living room doing homework. These small details mattered more than the grand gestures people imagined when they thought about power. To Sophia, power now meant predictability, the comfort of knowing where her father was, and the quiet certainty that he would come back. One afternoon, Luca took Sophia for a drive without telling anyone else. No convoy, no trailing vehicles, just the two of them, moving through parts of the city she remembered from another life. They passed a small park, where she had once begged him to push her higher on the swings, and Luca slowed the car instinctively, his chest tightening at the memory. Sophia noticed and said nothing, understanding that some emotions didn't need words to exist. They stopped near the cemetery but did not go inside. Luca parked the car and turned off the engine, resting his hands on the steering wheel as if grounding himself. He told Sophia he didn't want the grave to define her story anymore, but he also didn't want to pretend it hadn't mattered. That place had been real for him. The pain had been real, and honoring that didn't mean living inside it forever. Sophia listened quietly, then surprised him by asking if they could remove the headstone one day. Not destroy it, not erase it, but take it away and replace it with something living. A tree, maybe, something that grew instead of something that marked an ending. Luca felt his throat tighten as he nodded, realizing how deeply she understood loss and renewal despite her age. As the days passed, the final pieces of Vincent's network unraveled. Information surfaced that confirmed Luca's worst fears and validated his instincts. Vincent had not acted entirely alone, but he had been the only one reckless enough to move without cover. The others had supported him quietly, assuming Luca's grief had made him predictable. They had miscalculated the most important thing. Grief had not weakened Luca. It had sharpened him. Luca handled the remaining conspirators without spectacle. There were no dramatic confrontations, no displays of cruelty. Instead, he removed them from positions of influence, dismantled their access, and isolated them until their power dissolved into irrelevance. It was a cleaner ending than they deserved, but Luca did not act for their sake. He acted for Sophia's. Every restrained decision was another step away from the world that had almost consumed her. One evening, Sophia overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. Luca was speaking quietly with one of his oldest associates, explaining that certain lines would no longer be crossed, that some business, no matter how profitable, would never return. The man sounded confused, even frustrated, but Luca's response was calm and final. He said that legacy was not built by how much one controlled, but by what one chose to protect. Later, Sophia asked him if he was afraid of losing respect. Luca thought about it carefully before answering. He told her that respect earned through fear disappeared the moment fear faded, but respect earned through consistency had a way of surviving even when power changed hands. Sophia nodded, absorbing the lesson not as a Mafia truth, but as a life one. That night, Sophia struggled to sleep. The memories came uninvited, sharp and vivid, the sound of metal twisting and lights blinding her again from the inside of her mind. Luca heard her moving in her room and came to sit beside her, saying nothing at first. He waited until her breathing slowed, until the fear loosened its grip just enough for words to exist. Sophia told him she was afraid the world would always feel like this, fragile and unpredictable. Luca listened without interrupting, then told her the truth he had learned too late. The world had always been fragile. He had simply believed he could overpower it. What mattered now was not eliminating fear entirely, but learning how to live without letting it decide who they became. In the days that followed, preparations began for something symbolic but necessary. The official narrative of Sophia's death had to be undone carefully, legally and without inviting unwanted attention. Lawyers worked quietly. Documents were corrected. Stories were adjusted. It would take time and Sophia would remain protected until the process was complete, but the end was finally in sight. Luca visited the cemetery alone one last time. He stood before the empty space where the headstone would soon be removed and felt a strange sense of closure. He did not apologize this time. He did not beg. Instead, he thanked the silence for teaching him what power never had. When he turned away, it felt permanent in the best possible way. At home that evening, Sophia sat beside him, sketching in a notebook she had found tucked away in a drawer. Luca watched as she drew a tree with wide branches and deep roots, sunlight breaking through its leaves. She smiled as she explained that the roots were important, because they kept the tree standing even when storms came. Luca understood then that the story was almost finished, not because all danger had vanished, but because the meaning had finally changed. They were no longer running from the past. They were walking deliberately into a future neither of them had planned, but both were finally ready to face. The official end did not arrive with a single announcement or dramatic revelation. It came quietly, the way real endings often do, through a sequence of careful corrections that slowly replaced a lie with something closer to truth. Legal documents were amended, records were updated. The story of Sophia Moretti's death faded from whispered certainty into administrative error, then into something no one outside a narrow circle bothered to question anymore. For the world, it was an adjustment. For Luca and Sophia, it was the closing of a wound that had never fully healed. Sophia returned to school under a different arrangement, protected but no longer hidden, her presence explained without spectacle. Children asked questions that adults never dared to ask, and she answered them with a calm maturity that surprised even her teachers. Luca watched from a distance as she rebuilt something resembling a normal life, knowing that normal would never mean the same thing for her again. Still, there was laughter now. Routine, the fragile but powerful act of moving forward. Luca's world changed permanently, though few could articulate exactly how. The empire still existed, but it no longer expanded blindly. He trimmed it, reshaped it, and stripped it of excess that once felt essential. Some allies drifted away, uncomfortable with a leader who no longer ruled through unpredictability and fear. Others stayed, adapting to a new kind of order, one built on discipline and boundaries rather than chaos. Luca did not mourn what he lost. He understood now that not everything that falls away is meant to be kept. One afternoon, Luca and Sophia finally returned to the cemetery together. The headstone was gone. In its place stood a young tree, its trunk thin but steady, its leaves catching the sunlight in quiet defiance of what had once been carved into stone. Sophia knelt beside it, pressing her hand into the soil, grounding herself in something alive and growing. Luca watched her, feeling a sense of peace he had never known before, even in his most powerful years. They stood there for a long time without speaking, sharing a silence that no longer hurt. Luca realized that the grief he once carried like a permanent weight had transformed into something else entirely. It had become memory without despair, love without fear of loss consuming him whole. He knew the pain would never vanish completely, but it no longer controlled him. It informed him, guided him, reminded him of what truly mattered. That evening back at home, Luca cooked dinner again, still imperfect, still learning. Sophia teased him gently, correcting his mistakes with exaggerated seriousness, and for a moment the world felt astonishingly ordinary. Luca understood then that this was the victory he had never known how to name before. Not dominance, not survival, but presence. Being there, being allowed to stay. Later, as Sophia prepared for bed, she asked him a question that had clearly been waiting inside her for some time. She asked whether he regretted the life he had lived before, the choices that had put them both in danger. Luca thought carefully before answering, because he had learned that honesty mattered more now than comfort. He told her that regret was complicated, that every choice had led him to her standing alive in front of him, and that what mattered most was not erasing the past, but refusing to repeat its worst parts. Sophia accepted the answer with the quiet wisdom she had been forced to develop too early. She hugged him tightly before going to her room, leaving Luca alone with his thoughts and a house that finally felt full again. He stood for a long time in the hallway, listening to the ordinary sounds of life continuing, aware of how close he had come to losing all of it forever. In the days that followed, Luca stepped further away from the center of conflict, allowing others to manage what once consumed him entirely. He remained respected but no longer feared in the same way. That suited him. Fear had nearly taken everything from him. Respect, he had learned, could coexist with restraint, with mercy, with change. One night, Luca returned alone to the balcony where he had once stood, convinced that he had nothing left to lose. The city lights looked the same, but he did not. He no longer saw a battlefield below him. He saw a place where his daughter would grow up, where choices still mattered, where the future was uncertain but no longer empty. He breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the past finally settle into something manageable. Luca Moretti had cried at his daughter's grave, believing the world had taken her from him forever. He had stood broken, powerless, convinced that love had been his greatest weakness. He understood now how wrong that belief had been. Love had not weakened him. It had stripped away the lies he told himself about control, about strength, about what it meant to win. Sophia was alive. Not because of his power, but because of courage, timing, and the fragile chain of human choices that could just as easily have ended differently. Luca accepted that truth fully, humbly, knowing that some things could never be owned, only protected while they lasted. As he turned back inside, leaving the city behind him for the night, Luca allowed himself one final thought, simple and complete. Whatever the world demanded of him tomorrow, he would meet it as a father who had learned the cost of loss and the value of restraint. And that, more than any empire, would be the legacy he chose to leave behind. What did you think of the story? Subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who will also be moved today.